Good morning, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Kylie. I'm a librarian with the Hawaii State Public Library System. And thank you so much for joining us this morning. Our guest this morning for our author talk is author Terri Farley. She is known for her Phantom Stallion series, Wild Horse Island
Hi,
series.
I can't hear the audio.
Mrs. Farley is having a little issues with her audio. She also wrote the Wild at Heart nonfiction, and all of her books are available via our Hawaii State Public Library catalog. If you want to learn more about her after today, her website is terrifarley.com. So without further ado, I just have to do a few mahalos before we start, Mrs. Farley. So today I have to make sure that I give a big shout out to our friends of the library. They are sponsoring this event, so mahalo to them for always supporting our library system. So without further ado, are you ready for some questions? So today we're gonna ask a few questions, and those of you that are live on Facebook right now, feel free to type comments and questions into the chat box, and we will read them out as we go along. We're gonna spend about 20 minutes to 30 minutes answering some questions, and then we're gonna get to the live questions, okay? All right. Mrs. Farley, are you ready for our first question today?
I think so.
Okay.
And Kylie, you can just put up pictures as you think they go with what I'm saying. So you don't have to wait for me to go, Kylie, hit it or anything.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so there are so many questions that I wanted to ask you today, and we had to narrow it down to this short hour clip. But what I really wanted to know is, where did you get your inspiration for your Phantom Stallion series? Because that was really your first big work that you published.
Okay,
right?
I think you said, where do I get my inspiration? And I have always loved horses, and I've always been a reader. I was one of those kids that I was really allergic to everything. So books were my entrance into the world. And I loved horses, but I lived in Los Angeles, so I wasn't around them much. When I grew up, I moved to Nevada, and by then I had outgrown my allergies, and I fell in love with wild horses. And I spend as much time as I can out on the range. So maybe you can show some of those pictures.
Perfect. Okay. So these are some of photos from Terri Farley, and this is her book Wild at Heart. Since we've come to this slide, Mrs. Farley, I wanted to ask you, how do you do the research for your books? Like, where do you go? Where's your go-to places?
Well, I came to Hawaii for the Wild Horse Island series. Let me back up a little bit. My first series was the Phantom Stallion series, and that takes place in northern Nevada on a fictional ranch out near the edge of the Black Rock Desert. And if you've ever heard of the Burning Man celebration, it's out there, but it's the rest of the year, it is just wide open spaces without people. And I spent some time out there, well, a lot of time out there watching wild horses. And so when I did the, just a second, I've got a message on my screen. Oops, went away. When I went on a cattle drive, and we're going to talk about that more in a minute, but I went on a cattle drive out across the Black Rock Desert, and I got this wonderful idea for a wild horse series. So I wrote that, and we're going to do a video about that in a minute, but then that series did really well, and I was able to do a spin-off that takes place in Hawaii. And I lived on the Big Island for a while on Dahana Ranch, which is, it shares a border with Parker Ranch, but we didn't go over there. And I spent all of my time on a ranch, kind of job shadowing the Paniolo.
How was shadowing Paniolos around their everyday life?
It was really, really cool. Kuuipo lived on the ranch, and she was one of my readers just at the same time you were. And she and her little sister, Akana, kind of took me under their wings. And their dad, Harry Nakoa, helped too. But Akana was about, I don't know, like 9 when I got there, maybe younger, maybe 5. And she offered to saddle my horse on the first day because I was making such a mess of it. But I rode a little sorrel horse called Hoku, and I wanted to bring her back to Nevada, but when I heard what she would have to go through to get here, I decided it wasn't going to be worth it for her. It would be too traumatic to be shipped over here, and I couldn't afford to fly her. So I followed everyone. I kind of hung back. They did a lot more galloping than I was comfortable with, but they also took some tourists out on rides. I don't know if I've got any pictures of Hawaii that I sent you.
I don't think so. Not that you sent me.
Oh, too bad. Well, if anyone wants to go on my website, terrifarley.com, I'm pretty sure I have some there. And Kylie has some of the Wild Horse Island books behind her.
So this is the first book behind me.
Phantom Stallion video now about how I met the real Phantom Stallion.
Oh yeah, that would be cool. Okay, let me share that video. Give me 1 second. Bear with me, everyone. I just have to skip to the video, and then I'm gonna share my computer audio real quick. Okay.
I got the idea for the Phantom Stallion series when I was on a cattle drive out at the edge of the Black Rock Desert. I was riding behind the herd, and it was a very misty morning, and steam was rising up off the rocks. And I looked down this little slot canyon, and I thought I saw a white horse. But just as I saw the white horse, my cow pony Ace saw a cow. And so he took off after the cow. By the time we brought her back into the herd, we investigated the canyon, and there was nothing there. And that mystery horse kind of triggered the idea for me of the Phantom Stallion series. I wondered what would happen if there was a white stallion that came and went so quickly that people thought he was a ghost, and they began calling him the Phantom. I thought that horse just lived in my imagination until, for about 10 years, until I found out that there was a wild white stallion near Stagecoach, Nevada, approximately 100 miles where I saw my ghost horse, and he had been brought in by the BLM, actually by the Department of Agriculture, because his winter territory had been usurped by a housing development. And luckily for the Phantom, and that's what all the people who had seen him over the 10-year period had been calling him, even though I didn't know he was there. They thought I was in on the secret, but I wasn't. Luckily for the Phantom, the Wild Horse Sanctuary in Shingletown, California, near Mount Lassen, was able to take him and his one remaining mare, and they are now going to be set free on 5,000 acres with other bands of wild horses. In the meantime, the Phantom has been given for other mares who are wild horses that just didn't settle into their adoptive homes. Civilization was not their thing. And so very soon he'll be roaming 5,000 acres with hundreds of other wild horses.
Okay, that went really well. Could you hear the audio, Mrs. Farley, on that one?
I could hear some of it.
Perfect. Okay.
So that is how I met the Phantom, and he is still in that sanctuary. Kylie, do you have that picture of the white horse charging straight at you that I sent to you?
I do have that picture. Let me share it with
Okay.
everyone really quickly.
And
Just bear with me. I have it on slides,
Okay.
so I have to go
well,
back
I'll
and
just
forth.
keep talking. It's a more recent picture of the Phantom, and it was taken by Melissa Farlow, who worked with me on my nonfiction book. There it is. There he is. Hi, Phantom. And the reason I got together with Melissa Farlow, the photojournalist who took this, is because she took that picture and people said, oh, you should show that to Terry. She helped get him here. And so that's what happened. He was supposed to be gelded and sold as a pet, but he was a 12-year-old wild stallion. There was no way that he was going to be anybody's pet horse. So he's living on 5,000 fenced acres, being a wild horse.
Okay, let me switch back to our faces. Yay! Technology is so great these days that we're able to not only hear you today, but also be able to view these videos and these photos. The quality of the photos is also better when we share it compared to holding it up to the screen. Are you ready? There's some messages in the chat box.
I'll chime in here. I hope I'm not talking over you, but no. Writing books is something that I was a teacher. I was a middle school teacher and then a high school teacher. And I always wanted my students to love books as much as I did. And that didn't always happen. But what's happened since I started writing the Phantom Stallion series and the Wild Horse Island series and 7 Tears into the Sea and all of my books is that I hear from so many kids who are enthusiastic readers, and not just kids. I hear from adults who follow the Phantom Stallion series, and an awful lot of them think that 7 Tears into the Sea, my only non-horse book, should be made into a movie, which would be lovely. That's sort of my, not a mission, but that's one of the most wonderful things about being an author is there are these enthusiastic readers who are enjoying books, whether it's on Kindle or audio books, but they're enjoying stories because I wrote them. I take these stories out of my imagination and I'm able to share them with my readers. Mm-hmm. And via the internet, for a while I was hearing from 100 readers a day. Right now it's slacked off a little, but it makes me feel like my classroom is a lot bigger and a lot more fun.
And I have to tell you, Mrs. Farley, that when you talk about getting emails from all of your readers, I just wanted everyone live on Facebook today to know that when I was in the 6th grade, I was one of those 100 readers that emailed my favorite author because her website said that if I wanted to send her an email, I could. And I asked my mom if I could write to the author of the Phantom Stallion series, and she said okay. what's really cool about Mrs. Farley is that she always sends you a response when you send her an email. And so we have been emailing each other for the past more than 10 years, right, Mrs. Farley?
Yeah,
Going
absolutely.
back and forth.
Yeah.
So that I think is really cool when you as an author are so invested in your readership that you always take the time out of your really busy schedule to respond to all those young readers that are really enjoying your books.
Oh, it's great. Maybe you can show some of those pictures of when I'm at school visits and when I do library visits.
Perfect. And then while we're showing the pictures of your school visits, what's one piece of advice that you would give inspiring young writers, since we're going to be sharing about some of the writers that you get to meet and work with?
Okay, the way I did it, the way I became a writer was that, like I said before, I read constantly. That has never stopped. And I was this weak, sickly, asthmatic kid, but I found out that I could write adventures. And so one of the things I would advise readers to do is to write the story that you'd like to read, or write the story of your wildest adventures, what you'd really like to do, even if it's absolutely impossible. You can write that story. You are totally in charge when you write that story. So I would definitely read a lot, and I would write things, even if it's not a complete story, it doesn't matter. I have a whole, like a little tin recipe box where anytime I get a good idea, I jot it down on a piece of paper and stuff it in this box. And sometimes it takes me years to get around to that idea. In the Phantom Stallion books, I'm trying to think which book it is. I can't remember which one it is, but Jake breaks his arm. And that he breaks it because he's riding a galloping horse in the mud, and the horse slips and falls down on its side. Oh, maybe it was his leg that it crushed. But I heard, in my imagination, I heard the sound of those hooves running on mud and the sound of that horse slipping and slamming down on its side, you know, squashing the stirrup, squashing the leg. And I heard that in my imagination years before I knew where that scene was going to go. So I would tell think of a story that they would write. I wouldn't take stories from anybody else, although there is a lot of fan fiction out there. People write more adventures for their favorite books or their favorite stories. There's fan fiction out there for Phantom Stallion, for sure, and for Wild Horse Island. And then if you contests, that's one of the ways that I got started. I looked for contests that were limited to people my age. And you may even ask your teachers or look online for contests that are limited to people your age, and enter your stories. And then if you decide that you do want to get published by a big book publisher, you'll have something to tell them about. You can say, well, I won and then fill in the blank with whichever thing you want. In fact, if you look at the book on on, I think it'll be the left side of your screen. I'm with a little girl holding Wild Horse Island. Wild at Heart, my nonfiction book. It won a contest that I didn't even enter, but it won a contest by the National Science Teachers Association. It was just honorable mention, but I got stickers and things like that because they thought it was a good book. So contests go on throughout a writer's life, but you can start that now.
Okay, Mrs. Farley, I just wanted to read out some of the messages that are coming via the Facebook Live, if you don't mind.
Oh, goody.
Perfect. Okay, so some of these might be a little bit delayed from before when you were talking, but we have a Rachel Fernandez and a Susan Nakata who are talking about how beautiful the images were that you showed of the horses. And let's see, Rachel Fernandez said that write a story you'd like to read is a great tip for writers.
Okay, I lost you there. I didn't hear what Rachel said.
Oh, sorry. She said that writing a story that you'd like to read is a great tip to give to writers.
Good, good.
Okay, perfect. I'm going to come back to our faces now. I just am so excited that you're here with us today. For your information, when I was planning to do this author talk with you, I actually looked up kind of our circulation reports for your books to just kind of look at, you know, how many kids are reading The Phantom Stallion, how many kids are reading Wild Horse Island, because I was so curious. And I just, for your information and for those of you that are on Facebook Live, here with our Hawaii State Public Library system, your Wild Horse Island series is actually more popular than your Phantom Stallion series with our library readers here in Hawaii. And I just wanted to let you know that very dorky librarian fact, because I'm a librarian and I couldn't help myself to look up everything. People are really enjoying your books. And in fact, this is my personal set because when I requested a set from another library, they were so well loved. They had been checked out so many times that you couldn't really read the spines anymore on the book. So what I had to do is just bring my set from home just so that they would look a little better on camera. But the library sets are really, really well loved. I believe I requested my set from Kapolei. And for those of you on the Facebook Live today, just know that you can request Mrs. Farley's books via our Hawaii State Public Catalog, and you can do curbside pickup at your closest public library. Yeah, one of the best
places to get them now is libraries. The books, the Phantom Stallion and Wild Horse Island books are hard to find right now, but we will be reissuing those soon. I don't know how soon, probably with new covers. And something I do know is that all 35 of the books, the original Phantom Stallion series and the downloaded, and that's supposed to start in January, but all of those, all 35 books will be available to anybody who wants to read them. Schools, libraries, or if you just want to kick back and pretend you're either in Hawaii or you are in Wild Nevada. Oh, one thing about the Hawaiian stories, although the stories kind of feel like they're on the Big Island because that's where I did my research, they actually are on a fictional Hawaiian island. I know that thought, you know, like I said, you get ideas, and so I made the island up, and you'll have to read the books to find out what it's called and what the differences are, but it's not a real Hawaiian island because I'm not a Hawaiian. I don't know the islands as intimately as somebody who lives there.
Mrs. Farley, I have a really cool Facebook Live comment that I just wanted to read to you really quickly. And for those of you that are on Facebook Live, while I'm reading out these comments, we might ask Mrs. Farley maybe just one more question. But while I'm asking this question, I really wanted to emphasize that if you guys have any questions for her, if you're live on Facebook right now, please feel free to put those questions live on the Facebook chat. There is maybe about a 20-second delay between when I get the chat and when you type it. So don't feel like I'm ignoring your guys' questions. I'm just getting them a little bit late, which is why we're going to answer a question. And then when that question's done, I will check the Facebook Live comments again. But there is one comment I really want to read out to you because it's really cool. Not that everyone else's comments aren't really cool, but I'm really excited about this one. So there's a Lisa Anderson. And she says that I love the Phantom Stallion series and Wild Horse Island since I was 11. Now I'm 27. Mrs. Farley's books have inspired me to write. She started with fan fiction, she mentioned. I still write Phantom Stallion and Wild Horse Island fanfics today, and I've been writing since I was 15. I just bought all the Phantom Stallion and Wild Horse Island books that I was missing on thrift books, she said. So that's so exciting. I'm also one of those readers that I have been reading. I read the Phantom Stallion a really long time ago, and I'm so stoked today that we have Mrs. Farley live to be able to ask questions and be able to talk to. So while everyone is thinking of questions to ask you in the Facebook Live chat, I just wanted to also point out that I love during your Wild Horse Island series that I noticed you. Oh. So for those of you on Facebook Live, Mrs. Farley is in Nevada in a kind of rural area. So our connection is not as good sometimes. It takes a little while for my audio to get to her in Nevada. So for your Wild Horse Island series, Mrs. Farley, is the audio working now?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. What I really appreciate is you took some current day issues at that time that was going on in Hawaii and incorporated them into your books. So I know that some of your research was about keeping up with what was going on in Hawaii at that time. Specifically, the idea of repatriation is something that you hit in that book, and that I thought was really cool that you looked into things that were going on currently. Did you lose my audio again? But is that part of your research process where you also look into current day issues for your books, for your fictional works?
Absolutely. There are issues in my nonfiction book. I'm very involved and doing all I can to help save the West's wild horses. They're being rounded up every day. This week, hundreds were rounded up, and they're rounded up with helicopters, as you can see in some of the photographs. And those horses are running for their lives. Those horses are put in pens. They're inoculated, which is nice, so they don't get diseases from domesticated horses. But then they are gelded, and they are just kept in pens for the rest of their lives. Another thing I worry about, and a book that's not out yet, but I have high hopes for it. I talk a lot about leadership and what it means. Well, I don't talk about it, but the horses experience what it means to have a good leader or a bad leader. And so I go into that, and I also look at what's happening to our environment. And it can't help, real life can't help but kind of soak into my fiction and my nonfiction. And, it's not preachy when it's in a story. And I don't plan to preach at anyone and make them feel like I do, but I do know that a love of nature, having a backbone, you know, being a little bit braver than you think you are. Those things I've heard from readers, and they get some of that from my stories. I'm not nearly as brave as my fictional characters. You know, Samantha Ann Forster is has some guts, but I'm not as brave as she is. I will tell you about one of my readers, Mona, who read my books in German. My books are in many languages, and I'm so happy for that. In fact, they might be coming out on ebooks in Swedish soon. But Mona loved my books, and she had to wait till she was 18 to come over to Nevada. And she didn't want to go to Las Vegas, Nevada. She wanted to go to the north end of the state, the high desert where my stories take place. And she ended up working with a friend of mine whose nickname is Palomino, who takes in orphaned wild horse foals and nurses them back to life. So Mona from Germany came to Nevada and worked with all of these wild babies. And, you know, I think that was so cool that was one of her dreams, that she wanted to come to Nevada and see our wild horses before they were gone. And she did it.
Oh, that's so cool. If I had enough money right now, I would totally go to Nevada. I'm kind of a strange personality type, and you know, get
and
like how you say
to encourage some wild horse tourism, because seeing horses living wild, you know, with their babies and with the lead mares and the stallions is on a lot of people's bucket lists. And people, it's a hard time to go to Africa and go on safari, but you can be outdoors in the wilds of Nevada. And there are people I know, one's named Cheryl, one's named Marty, who will take people out onto the range, and they know the secret places where some of the wild horses hang out, and you can just sit in a chair very quietly with binoculars, or sometimes you can even get closer and watch the horses have their real lives, because they're mammals like we are. And you know, when I wrote my nonfiction book, I learned a lot more about wild horse science, but they have a lot in common with us. And their band, their family band, is the most important thing to them. And watching them interact, the mothers with the babies, of course, but there are cranky old aunties who try to tell the new moms what they should do with their babies. And there are rowdy teenagers who are just on the verge of being kicked out of the band to all the young males will live together. It's called a bachelor band, and they have like a boot camp where they have these mock fights as they're learning the survival skills they'll need for when they have their own families.
Oh, speaking of observing wild horses, I remember when you came to do your research in Hawaii, you were interested in the nightingales on the Big Island.
Yes.
Did you get to see a nightingale while you were here in Hawaii a while back?
Never did. Never did. You can tell a little bit about that for people who maybe aren't on the islands.
So for those viewers today for Facebook Live, Terri Farley's very, she loves wild horses and protecting, you know, wild horses, keeping them in the wild. And she found out that in Hawaii on the Big Island, we have nightingales. And the nightingales are a wild correct me if I'm wrong, Mrs. Farley, wild mules?
Donkeys.
Donkeys. Yeah. They're wild donkeys that just roam free on the Big Island. And there are Hawaii version of wild Mustangs. There are wild donkeys. And I know that while she was here, she was trying to see if she could see one in person, but I have not seen one in person. But if any of you who are tuned in live have seen a nightingale, you guys can put that in the comment, because that would be really cool, because that's been on my bucket list too, to be able to do that.
Well, and I heard that originally what happened, and I think it was on the Big Island, that there were, that these burros or donkeys were carrying coffee beans from up in the mountains and down to, down closer to the shore. And they were trained to do that. And then when this particular coffee plantation went out of business, and I'm sure I'm just warping this story, but this is what I've still got in my head, that the donkeys were turned loose, but they still made that trip for years and years from up in their mountain home down to the shore, as if they were still carrying coffee beans.
And I think your website too has a picture of a nightingale. Is that correct? Is that picture still on there?
I think so. And I have one, oh shoot, what's the name of the name of the valley where there are still some wild horses? It's on the Big Island. It's not very far from Dahana Ranch. If there's anybody who's been to the Big Island to Dahana Ranch, they can help tell me. But there's a valley where there were some wild horses, and I did see some of those. They have a tourist horseback ride where you can ride into the valley and you can see some of those horses. And the story there is that years and years ago, there was a tsunami that wiped out some little farms. And so a lot of the animals that survived live in the rainforest now. And so that's how they got there.
One of our Facebook Live people tuning in said Waipio ? Does that sound familiar?
What is it?
They said, is it Waipio Valley?
Absolutely, Waipio. Yes. Yes. And I do have a picture of that on my website.
Oh, cool.
There was one little sorrel horse that looked at me, and it was so cool because there were all these vines in front of her. And I saw this, I don't know why I think she was a female, but I thought she was a little filly. And she was looking at me through these vines. It was very cool.
One of our Facebook Live
Thanks
people,
to
Danielle,
whoever knew where I was.
So Danielle said that she's always wanted to see a nightingale on our Facebook Live chat. And actually, I believe that Miss Danielle is from the Big Island. And she said she's never seen a nightingale, only goats, only wild goats.
You know, in one of the other islands, I'd have to look that up because I know coffee's several places, but we'll have to follow up. I might know a librarian who could look that up.
In fact, I'm thinking in my head, if I have any books about nightingales, that's
if
probably
not, somebody
we
should write one. About.
Right. If anyone is out there inspired to write a nonfiction book about nightingales, that would be really cool. There's one Facebook Live comment, Mrs. Farley, from a Lisa Anderson, who says that it would be a dream come true to visit Nevada and see wild horses. Here on the East Coast of the US, we have a few wild herds.
I didn't hear Lisa's question.
Oh, sorry. Okay. So Lisa says it would be a dream come true to visit Nevada and see wild horses. Here on the East Coast of the US, we have a few wild herds on islands, but nothing like the West wild horses.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty amazing to go out there and watch them just be themselves. And I take every opportunity I can to go out there and we lose horses because people feed them, and they'll go to houses, or they'll go near the freeway and get hit by cars. And a lot of Nevada horse folk have gotten authorization. Even it's illegal to feed the horses, but some Nevada organizations have gotten authorization from the state to do what's called diversionary feeding. And so they feed the horses back up in the mountains where they should be and get them away from the roads. And, you know, people, it's kind of like killing them with kindness. They want to see the horses, they want to touch the horses, but it's not healthy for them to come down into civilization. One of the reasons, you know, when I was telling the story of how I met the real Phantom, one of the reasons he was down to one mare is that horses were hit by cars, and you know, a foal was taken down by pet dogs. They get into this herd behavior and pack behavior, actually, for dogs, and they attacked a foal. And if that happens in the wild, if it's like a mountain lion or coyotes or something, that's part of nature. But when the horses come into civilization, they're not equipped to deal with dogs and cars. They don't know how to do that. And so we really encourage people, if they want to see the horses in their natural habitat, to find a guide that can take them on a photo safari to see those horses without endangering them.
So I just had a question for you, and it flew out of my head. Oh, yes, I know. So we're talking about all these places. Lisa Anderson mentioned,
and I didn't hear it. I'm sorry. One more time.
Our Facebook Live person, Lisa Anderson, she mentions the East Coast and the wild horses on the island. That reminds me that earlier you were talking about books that you delve into because you couldn't be outside because of your allergies. So what are some of the books that you read as a young person that you kept going back to over and over again?
Misty of Chincoteague, which takes place on Chincoteague Island on the East Coast, was one I loved. In fact, I did drag my family there when we were visiting Washington, D.C. I showed them on the map that it was this close. And let's see, I loved that. I loved a lot of Marguerite Henry's books. The King of the Wind, oh my gosh, such a beautiful, beautiful story. And I did read some Black Stallion books. The thing about the Black Stallion books, and I'm sure this inspired me, is that the only people having the adventures were boys. And so in my books, there are boys having adventures, Jake certainly, but there are, you know, Sam and her best friend Jen get to have most of the adventures. And, you know, it probably said a lot about the time I was growing up that the Walter Farley books, no relation, had the boys having all of the adventures, but that's not true now.
I also really enjoyed, for those of you who are tuning in Facebook Live, I really enjoyed Misty of Chincoteague too. In fact, some of our libraries have beautiful illustrated editions of those books, like King of the Winds by Margaret Henry. They just came out with an anniversary edition copy, I believe, of that one that has really for those of you who have not read it,
book. And,
the artwork is also awesome.
The only book I read as a kid that had someone who wasn't a Christian. The boy in that was practicing the Muslim religion, and it was a big part of that story. And he wasn't a little white American boy, which was, you know, when I was growing up, most of the characters in the books fit that mold. And that's, you know, there's a lot of talk now about cultural appropriation, like who's allowed to tell these stories. And that wasn't an issue when I was growing up. So it was all right for Marguerite Henry to introduce her readers to a different person in a different country, practicing a different religion. And it was a good book for me. It was just a wonderful book for me.
And for those of you that aren't familiar with King of the Wind, I believe it's gotten, correct me if I'm wrong, Mrs. Farley, a Newbery
Yes,
Award?
pretty
It's
sure.
a Newbery Award winner. And it follows the story of the creation of the Godolphin Arabian, which is kind of like the beginning of the American Thoroughbred line. How did American Thoroughbreds end up being a thing, a breed here in by sending Arabian stallions to, it's England at that time, yes, England. It's been a little while since I've reread King of the Wind. Mrs. Farley, so we don't currently have any questions from our readers live. Do you mind if I pester you with more questions?
No, please, please.
Okay.
I hope I hear them.
For those of you that are on Facebook Live, I really appreciate you guys tuning in and your guys' comments today. Me and Mrs. Farley are so stoked that you're joining us. Like I said, even though I'm going to ask her a question or two more, if you guys think of any last minute questions, feel free to put it into the live comment box while we're talking. And I promise I will try to get to them before the end of our hour is up. Mrs. Farley, so speaking of your cover art for your books, do you get to choose your cover art? Because we did a children's author interview last week where he designs the whole book. He does all the illustrations and the writing himself. But for you, do you get to choose the
It's
covers?
interesting. The reason I eventually did get to pick the cover art for the Phantom Stallion series is because of a mistake. Book 5 of the Phantom Stallion series had a little foal on a baby horse on the cover, and she was a medicine hat pinto. Now, I adopted, I don't know if I sent you a picture of Ghost Dancer, my medicine hat, but a medicine hat horse has particular markings. They have dark ears, and they have a shield on their chest of darker color, and it's a particular kind of horse. And the legend is that Native American tribes in the mainland thought that these horses had special powers, that shield on their chest would protect horse and rider. So, I mean, that's a definite markings. Well, the foal that was on the cover didn't have those markings. It was a pinto horse, but it just had random spots any place. And also there was a problem with the artist, who was wonderful, but not a horse guy, thought that horses were born with pretty long tails, like an adult horse. And they aren't. They're born with little whisk broom tails, just little fluffy tails. And so that cover with the randomly spotted horse with the long tail was ready to go to press when I saw it and said, no, you can't do that. My readers know better. They know what a medicine hat is. Plus, it's described in the book. And they know that a baby horse has a short fluffy tail, not a long sleek tail.
Mhm.
So it costs the publisher a lot of money to have a second from my readers, and that they would know the difference. So after book 5, I always had cover approval so that the horses were right. The only one they didn't listen to me on was book 9, and that's a book called Gift Horse. And he was a mahogany colored bay in the book, and he's a very dark, dark brown horse on the cover. So, but on most of them, they listened to me. In 7 Tears into the Sea, which is my only non-horse book, and it's a story based on the Celtic legend of the Celtic. And a Celtic is a shapeshifter that can change from being a seal into a human being. And that, I've still got the original cover art that was done for it, and I loved it. It was beautiful. But the advertising department thought it needed a more contemporary cover, and so they did a photograph of bare feet walking in the water with like a, you can see it, you can look it up, but it's cool. And I had no problem with the change, but I kept the picture of the original. So sometimes you get cover approval, sometimes you don't, but I've had both experiences.
And I think that's not something that as a reader, we consciously think about, whether you guys have control over what the cover of the book looks like or not. So I think that's a really interesting story that you've had both experiences where you can choose and change, and then you cannot choose and change. We're actually coming to the end of our hour. So we're going to wrap up our talk. I'm kind of sad that our hour is over. But I just wanted to thank you, Mrs. Farley, for taking time out of your busy schedule today and joining us with our virtual adventure in doing these virtual programs.
Wrap up our talk. What was it?
Thank you for going on this virtual adventure with me with virtual programming. We learn new things every time we do a virtual program, and I really thank you for being part of our, like, not just our event today, but part of my learning experience going into this digital world. For those of you who are on Facebook Live, please check out our Facebook, the Hawaii State Public Library System Facebook, because we do have other author talks coming up for the month of August. I believe we have 2 more scheduled for the month of August. So please go check out our website and look to see what other cool authors we have and we're interviewing this month. It's also not too late to join our summer reading program. I have the flyer right there behind me. Imagine Your Story is our theme this year. You have time until August 31st to log your minutes, and our grand prize this year, Mrs. Farley, is 4 plane tickets to wherever Alaska Airlines flies. Oof. So last year, an elementary school student won the 4 plane tickets, and him and his family got to go to Disneyland, which is really cool. For more information about Mrs. Farley's books, please visit her website at www.terrifarley.com. We'll try to put that website in the comments box for you guys to easily access it. If you'd like to borrow some of her books, it's available via our Hawaii State Public Catalog. And you can do curbside pickup at your public library. And lastly, mahalo to our friends of the library for sponsoring this event. And if you want more details about any of our library things, please feel free to visit our library website at librarieshawaii.org. And then, Mrs. Farley, thank you so much again for coming today.
Thank you. I wish I were there, but this is the best we could do.
And I'm really glad that we got to see each other virtually after so long of being pen pals and phone pals. So everybody, I hope you guys have a great day today. And again, look for our upcoming author talks. Okay, we'll say see you later, everyone.